A customer-driven marketing strategy is one that focuses on building loyalty by addressing a customer's needs in every aspect of their buying journey. It's a strategy that focuses on targeting a specific set of customers, retaining them by meeting their needs, and using metrics to measure their satisfaction. Our guest is a firm believer in using customer driven marketing strategies, or what he prefers to call customer led marketing strategies, using video. He's garnered quite a bit of experience in the process. Here's what I know about him. He is a filmmaker turned entrepreneur with 9 years of experience in the B2B video marketing space. He is currently the CEO of Testimonial Hero, which is used by over 100 clients worldwide. Testimonial Hero is a global B2B video testimonial creation service whose mission is to make world-class customer storytelling effortless so B2B revenue teams can establish trust faster with new prospects, accelerate the buyer journey, and drive more revenue. Sam Shepler, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Vinay. It's great to be here.
Pleasure to have you. Sam, I'm a little curious. You've obviously had a lot of experience in the video marketing space, but what would you say is your personal area of strength?
Personally, for me, I think as an entrepreneur, and I guess just my personality, I think it's connecting the dots around trends, socially, culturally, technology trends, and then how it all relates to video, basically, to fundamentally solve problems. I think that's fairly common. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs is we all got to connect the dots, and I just love that. For me, I love like the kind of the intellectual challenge. Like I love problem solving and ultimately figuring out new ways to create different types of videos, which is of course what we did and what we do at Testimonial Hero with pushing into new boundaries around customer video.
And what would you say in that area of strength is something that businesses don't know but should?
Yeah, so I think it's my belief that the best way to, communicate value in, B2B sales and marketing is through the voice of customers. There's nothing that is as credible as when you can communicate a message through a customer. And I think there's a kind of common and a bit outdated feeling that, customer case studies and video testimonials and social proof are really techniques that we as marketers use at the bottom of the funnel to ultimately close a deal, when that's just a small part of the value. And ultimately, the more you can communicate through the voice of customers throughout the whole buyer journey, the better and your message will be received and the faster that buyer journey will be. Because ultimately, that's what we all want as B2B revenue leaders is to close deals faster. And it's my view that any message that comes from you, that's okay. But any message that comes from a customer, that's better. So it's like the real question is like, how can we think beyond just the basics, which is like a 90-second video testimonial, to think about like micro content and having customers actually answer frequently asked questions and just like all of these different forms of video content, and then just pepper them throughout the whole buyer journey and just help ultimately just reduce friction and have those deals close faster.
Excellent. Talking to you offline, we were talking about what I was referring to as customer-driven marketing strategies, but you said customer-led marketing strategies is probably the terminology that you use. Do you see a difference between the two, or is it just semantics?
Yeah, I think it's mostly semantics, but I think we're playing around with different terms, and we're always thinking about, of course, how to build the right category and all that, just like all marketers are. But I think the main thing is coming back to with customer-driven marketing or customer-led marketing. I like customer-led marketing because it speaks to you lead with your messaging with your customers, and you make your customers really an active participant in telling that story. So that to me is why I like customer led, because it just implies customers are leading the way and really communicating on your behalf.
Okay. And I totally get that point. I can see the value. It's something that I've tried to incorporate myself in trying to give that voice or incorporate that voice of the customer. What would you say, though, is the best way to identify customers that could really speak to your product or service without being too hypey or salesy, but certainly provide value in the message that they're delivering?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think even stepping back further, I guess the question is, it depends on your different verticals that you sell to. And ideally, the best thing to do is have customer stories for every single buyer persona that you sell to. So if you're selling to higher ed, you want a higher ed customer video content. And then if you also sell to manufacturing, you're going to want that manufacturing content as well, that manufacturing video testimonial. But the manufacturing video testimonial doesn't work so well with selling to the higher ed.
Yep.
So I think the step before you even identify which customers, what we always work with our clients to do is figure out what your main verticals are and also what your strategy is. And are you trying to break into new markets? And if so, which customer stories do you need to support those initiatives? Once you have a good high level feeling around that, I think it's extremely helpful to, especially if you're on the marketing side, involve your sales team in that conversation. Especially involve the customer success team as well, because often as marketers we don't actually know who the best customer. It depends on the tools you use and what you've set up, but like many times sales or customer success typically has the best feeling for who the happiest customers are, who the customers are that have had the most success. So that is my biggest piece of advice, is make sure and partner with sales, partner with success. And that is really, you need that cross-functional approach to identify the best stories.
And I would assume that in identifying the best stories, you also want to know a fair bit about the customer and their journey, their experience with your product and service, which would entail, at least in my mind, an ongoing investment in the customer and certainly their interests as well. Given how busy we all are with all that we need to do for our own businesses, how would you recommend we prioritize and invest that amount of time and energy into our best customers?
Yeah, I think in terms of, I always think of what customers do you want to attract more of? When in the shortest answer, I would say, figure out who that customer is that fits your ideal customer profile, and then try to get video testimonial from them. And that's just going to attract more like customers, because it's for video testimonials to really work. It's all about a prospect seeing themselves in the story that's being told. So we want to show a prospect who's watching that and say, wow, okay, I have that exact same problem. And the product X, or consultant X or agency X solved this. I have that exact same problem, and then the problem was solved. And okay, I'm going to go talk to that company. So that is, I think, super key.
Okay. And in knowing your customers and certainly eliciting that story or message, would you recommend that it should take more of the format of a story, or what was your experience with using XYZ product? I guess what I'm asking is, what should be the nature of the message? What is it that we're really aiming for in making that ask of a customer?
Yeah, I think there's different types of customer video content. And for a testimonial, because I think at the highest level, there's like customer video content. And then there's testimonials, there's maybe objection crushers, there's advertisements, and then there's other different use cases. But for a testimonial, the simplest story, and it's a great question, is it's a before and after story. You want to establish because prospects don't actually, this is a really key point. Most prospects are in denial that they have a problem.
Yeah.
As sellers, our prospects are in denial that they even have a problem to begin with. No glowing endorsement is going to matter to them until we get them to admit they have a problem. So that's why with a testimonial, the before part of it is talking about the problem and the challenges. And then the after is how it was solved and the results. And yeah, it's very critical to establish, the before. Otherwise, no one's going to care, because if I don't believe that I have that problem as a buyer, I'm not going to, there's no fertile ground for the results to really, impress me and have an impact when those results land.
Okay. So pretty much a story format. How would we know that the story is going to really resonate with our customers? Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe most people have a natural storytelling gift, so to speak. So how will we go about ensuring that we're able to craft and edit it, if you will, into something that is usable and will resonate with intended audience?
Absolutely. It's a great question. I think, that's honestly why a lot of customers work with us, because we help figure that strategy out. We figure out the right questions to ask to get the right content, and then our video editing team edits it. But so, yeah, I think that's one thing. Good questions, get good answers. As from the podcast, right? The better question you ask, the better answer you get, or the more interesting answer you get, right? Yeah. So that's step one, is thinking about what are and you have a limited amount of time with the customer, and you don't really often, get a chance to retake it, because your customer's doing you a favor. So you want to make the most of it. Step one, and this is part of our process, is beginning with the end in mind. So you have to figure out, what is the perfect testimonial video sound like? What are the 2 or 3 absolute key messages that a prospect who's watching this should, take away after viewing it? What do the perfect quotes sound like? And then once we have that vision of the end, and we do this, but anyone can do this, and this is just what I recommend. So figure out what you want at the end, and then write the questions that will elicit those responses, those building blocks to the story. And then, of course, the more artful you can edit it, that's really when you can condense it. Because when I speak about editing, we don't want to obviously change the story, but we do want to condense it. That is the most important role editing plays, because B2B buyers, there's a lot of noise. We need to get them. They need to get it quickly. So that's the real big thing is editing it, taking that 20-minute interview and taking that whole story into the perfect 90 seconds.
Oh, okay. Fair, really quite short, but if I am to understand this correctly, you're asking questions of the customer that would elicit the story, but how do you ensure that they actually being able to deliver value or highlight value in their experience, or certainly talk about outcomes that they've achieved? Quite often, at least in my experience, it tends to get a little blurry, because your product or service might be one of a few that they would be employing to achieve a particular outcome, and to separate things can be a bit of a difficult process or challenge, at least mentally, especially in a short time frame if they haven't been given much time to think about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a couple angles. Part of it is syncing up with them, the customer, in advance, and finding some common ground around what you want to emphasize in doing a 30-minute call, just talking through the interview questions, before conducting the actual interview, and saying, this is basically, we often ask, do all these questions look good? And here's what we were thinking with this question. Does that align with what you're feeling as well? The other thing is, many times you might not be able to tie, especially with services or agencies or consulting, if it's with the SaaS products, which are the majority of our customers, like often, you can tie a metric to the outcome, but with B2B services, it might be harder. I don't think that in and of itself is a huge issue, because there's other things that you can talk about in the testimonial that really, the question is, like, what is your value proposition? What are your differentiators? And how do you reinforce that with the testimonial? So, I think that ultimately, coming back to what we talked about in the beginning, the voice of the customer is just another medium for content, and all of your content should support and align with your key message, your strategic narrative. So then the question is, how do we just get what the customer is saying to just even add further impact to that strategic narrative at the highest level?
Okay. So if I understand this correctly, the client that you're working with should really be clear as to their USP, their unique selling point, which you are then looking to reinforce via your testimonial. Would that be correct?
That's absolutely correct. Although the nice thing is, even if they're not, they're going to get a great testimonial anyways.
Okay.
And sometimes people think that they're depending on the maturity of the business, especially with a startup, might think, oh, this is our USP, and then they ask their customer and they get a great testimonial, but it's actually a little bit different, and there's huge value. Like many times we've had our customers tell us, wow, thanks to doing this testimonial, I actually learned so much about how our customers view our product, and it evolved our positioning. So yeah, in a perfect world, especially for a mature company, absolutely. But I think it's certainly not a requirement. And there's a lot of just fortuitous, like as long as you have a happy customer, you're going to get a great testimonial. You might even learn something new that you didn't even realize in the process.
Okay. How would you say, and I'm assuming you've gone through this process yourself with Testimonial Hero, how would you say you've been able to utilize that feedback to improve your offering?
Definitely. Yeah. I think for one, you're able to draw just conclusions and just understand what are the commonalities and that customers really value. Like for us, like we realized that something that just kept coming up again and again was ease of use and just how easy it was. And people were surprised how easy it was to do something that there's a lot of pieces to it. Producing a customer video, there's a lot of pieces, but we have a really easy process. And then once we realized that's what people appreciated, we just started pushing that even more in terms of our messaging. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to just get that customer research that you ultimately also can turn into that super valuable sales and marketing content.
Okay. So are you saying that you take their feedback and list it, and when you see it, the similar sort of requests coming through time and again, then you go, right, this may be something that we need to offer, or is it pretty much done on a gut feel?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It depends how much time you have with the customer, because I'm not advocating that someone turn their customer research completely into testimonials, because I think the customer research is the questions are even a little bit different, but I think it's more like fortuitous. Like there will be, I think customer research isn't the main goal of customer video content. I think the main goal of customer video content is to drive revenue for sure. Like I've seen it time and time again. There are just fortuitous learnings without a doubt.
I know you work a lot with clients to get their clients on to video testimonials. I'm assuming, though, that not all of your clients' are very willing, at least initially, to give up their time and energy to someone that they don't know is essentially a third party who wants to grab some sort of testimonial or a conversation. How do you approach this? I'm assuming that your client would give you a bit of a warm intro, but what's your experience been like with that? Is that enough, or have you really had to spend time crafting your outreach in order to find success?
Yeah, it's a great question. For us, so we always, typically how it works is we help our customers behind the scenes to make that ask. So they actually make the ask. We recommend it comes from the person that the testifying customer has the best relationship with. So typically, often it's from their account manager or the person who sold the deal, because that's also pretty common. And then once the customer, and the key things for getting a yes, because you're right, there's a couple things in terms of how do you actually get people to agree. For one, just at the highest level, it's good to ask, like, how can I make this a two-way exchange of value, right? So it's not just my customer doing me a favor. They actually get some value out of it. One of the ways is just honestly like the best testimonials also make the customer that's being featured the hero of the story. And even to an extent, they make that individual that's talking the hero of the story. So it's really great industry recognition and peer recognition opportunities. And we often suggest our customers reach out to people and say, hey, like, you're doing an awesome, we want to hold you up as an example of best practices in your industry. And you're absolutely crushing it in this area. Let's capture the story. And it's good and also effective to make it about them. It's not, ultimately, they are the hero of the story. And people are generally, of course, like way more receptive to that. And also, another key thing is when you reach out, you want to answer any of their immediate like questions. How long will this take? And will I get a chance to review it prior? So we usually say, would you be open to sharing your experiences? It'll only take 30 minutes, and that's what it takes if it's a remote testimonial. And you'll get to review everything else prior. If you're open to that, I can share some more information. That sort of addresses a lot of the potential objections that someone might have. Most people have 30 minutes that they could slot in, at least in a couple of weeks. And yeah, so once the customer has actually gotten the agreement, that's when they introduce us. So we're not really convincing them as a third party. Then they say, great. They say, okay, awesome. This is our partner, our video testimonial partner, Testimonial Hero, and they are going to make this seamless for you. And then our customers stay CC'd. That's when we basically take it from there.
Okay. So I'm assuming a lot of this conversation would be happening either via phone or email before you come onto the scene, so to speak. And it starts with a discovery or a pre-interview chat before the actual recording. Would that be the process?
Yeah, I think it depends. And honestly, like, I am so removed from the nitty gritty of the process these days. My team is always improving and evolving the process. But yeah, I think it depends. We've certainly done it both ways. And it depends on, mostly it's some, customers are more transactional, smaller software subscribers. Like, there might not need to be a pre-call. Huge enterprise customers that it's a very close relationship and there's an account manager, yeah, they might want to do a call. So it's somewhat situational depending on that sort of dynamic.
Certainly. Excellent. Would you say that, in a sense, you, in your role, curating the experiences of your clients' customers?
Yeah, I think actually, I guess, potentially. I think if I take that to mean we are curating some of the success they've had. And then, yes, I think obviously there's positive experiences, there's negative experiences that customers have with any product. And yeah, I think that would be fair to say we're helping, curate those experiences. I think to even specify it even further, I think we're curating content from the voice of the customer that would be interesting and valuable to prospective buyers. Because ultimately, people engage with us when they want to better communicate value in their further offering, and then ultimately reduce friction in the sales process and close deals faster. So yeah, absolutely.
Could you give us an example of perhaps a client that's used these videos in order to accelerate their sales cycle, and examples of where they've used it?
Absolutely. So I think, one example, I think for every time that we create a video, we don't just create a one size fits all. So we'll usually create a standard 90 seconds to 2 minute version. Then we'll create a 30 to 45 second version. And then we'll create a 15-second version. So if even starting at the very top of the funnel, we have customers who have a ton of success using those 15-second versions to even just at the awareness stage to basically as ads to get people on their site. Then the 45-second version, that is a good length for driving a conversion, like on a landing page. You're still early on in the buyer's journey. You probably don't want to watch like a super long video. 45 seconds is a good length. Yeah. And then in terms of the 90-second to 120-second videos, ultimately those can be used anywhere, but we think that they go extremely, and we see them being used like on customers' pages primarily, some home pages as well, but absolutely by individual sales reps to keep deals moving. Because it's like one of the most common things, and we obviously do this ourselves as well, is if you need if a deal starts to slow down, you can there's a lot of things you can do, and it's not very effective to just send one of those like just checking in emails, and it doesn't really add any value, and also doesn't enhance credibility. So, but what you can do instead is be like, follow up in the, hi there, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect. I wanted to share this example featuring company X, just like you. Have a look about how and ideally it's the same exact, org title as you're selling to. If you're selling to a director of marketers, have a look at how their director of marketer achieved X with us recently. Like, it's like share a new video case study with them. So yeah, and then ultimately, and that's obviously at the more of the one-on-one basis further down the funnel. So yeah, I think it all comes back to this idea that anything is more credible coming from a customer, and you can create micro content and slice and dice your longer interviews and use them at different lengths where people have different attention spans, the whole buyer journey.
Certainly. Okay. How would you say that a client is able to measure the effectiveness of using video content, whether it be on a customer page, as you were putting it? And sorry, that might be a good question to ask. The customer page, are you referring to a pricing page or blog posts, or what exactly do you mean by
that? Actually just more like here, like customers page, I'm referring to actually our customers, or sometimes it's company X / customers. Yep. And usually it's the main page where a lot of have a big logo rack, customer list, customer case study. So it's like the pillar page for all of their social proof, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in terms of being able to track the effectiveness of or conversions with these pieces of content, how do you use it, and what would you recommend to clients?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you can get as advanced and sophisticated as you're willing to. And to be honest, I don't think most people worry. Some people do, but like a lot of people don't really track it, and they just have an anecdotal feeling that they know it's working because it's influencing pipeline, and it's helping deals close. So that's like the biggest, often when I ask, well, actually, let's just even pause for a second. Like, the fact that any sales marketing content is being used effectively in the sales process is quite rare. I think 80% of content that is created by marketing goes unused by sales. I think there's just utilization is a huge, no one's going to keep using things that aren't working. So when I ask our customers, I'm like, oh, how are the customer videos working? A really common response is like, they're working great. Sales loves them. They're using them, they're influencing deals. They helped us win this deal, and they want more of them. But like, they don't necessarily attribute like exact dollar values to them. Could that be done? Sure. Absolutely. Especially with new technology out there, you could implement lead scoring based on what percentage of the video that someone watched. And it's up to, do you have the resources? Do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the technical chops and the appetite to get really technical with your video hosting player, like a Vidyard or Wistia, and integrate that with your marketing automation platform? I think as it stands now, I don't think there's a lot of doubt, and there's not like, no one is skeptical in my experience about the value of video testimonials. So, thankfully for us, it's not, that big of an issue. But yeah, I think in the future, as measurement just gets easier and easier, we will see more measurement naturally, for sure.
We've talked a fair bit about how to go about crafting a customer-led marketing strategy and process. What would you say, from your experience, some of the mistakes, though, that you're seeing customers who are trying to attempt similar sorts of things make?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think the biggest, and maybe it's not a mistake, but I think it's maybe a missed opportunity, is thinking, very tactically and then missing the big strategic opportunity. And what I mean by that is thinking that testimonials are, video testimonials are just something that you use at the bottom of the funnel, where the opportunity, as I mentioned earlier as well, is like customer content, voice of the customer from all the way throughout the funnel, just in different formats.
And for listeners, I think they would know the effectiveness of video itself, and it's certainly in terms of engagement and the ability to convert. But thinking about this from a revenue or a sales perspective, I would imagine these could also be used on win-back campaigns to further retention and lifetime value. I can see a lot of potential in these types of content. Where would you say, though, this would evolve to over time?
Yeah, I totally agree with the win-back campaigns and expansions and such. I think in terms of where I see, customer video content evolving over time, definitely more full funnel as opposed to just being that sort of like bottom of the funnel asset. And then also I see it evolving, well, as I think generally speaking, now there used to be sales teams, marketing teams, and there used to be VP of sales and VP of marketing. And now we have the chief revenue officer who role in this idea of revenue teams and revenue leaders thinking, more holistically about customer success, sales, and marketing. Yeah, I think I see it being, I see customer content and customer led marketing being a more kind of, cross-functional holistic strategy especially for companies who think as a revenue team and not as just a siloed series of departments, for sure.
Putting this another way, would you say that this is also a way of facilitating the development of networks in capturing these customer stories or testimonials? You are essentially creating a piece of content that would allow you to tap into their respective networks and thereby draw more of a customer base to your product or service.
Yeah, I think that for sure. I think that's definitely an angle of it. And I think maybe even for us, there is a bit of a network effect on our end because we will create the customer testimonial video. We come in contact with our customer's customer in that process several times, many times. We actually end up networking with our customer's customer, and then they have such a good experience, they become our customer as well. So I would say, yeah, certainly for us personally, there has absolutely been a very significant, positive network effect in our business.
Excellent. Sam, is there an aspect of customer-led marketing using video that you feel we haven't quite covered but should highlight?
Yeah, I think there's two little ones I think are worth, there's a couple. I think in terms of the main use cases, we really talked about, video testimonials a lot, which I would define as like a before and after story, typically. And that's the most common form of customer-led marketing and customer video content. Another, great use case is, I think, what is like anything for sales enablement, which is a good example we call is like objection crusher video. So instead of being a, comprehensive before and after story with a nice story arc, it's more of like a video that you send that's specifically meant to crush a specific objection. And you use it at a very specific time, and it's typically manual. So if you have an objection and someone says, I don't know, like the implementation process for using your new software just seems, I can't handle this right now. I've got too much on my plate. Then you send that objection crusher video about how effortless and seamless the implementation process is. And that's not a before and after story. It's just an objection crusher. It's just sales enablement. I think another thing worth noting is just using customers for actual like content marketing. So you could create, while you're doing your customer interviews, you could ask your customer a question, what's your biggest challenge right now in industry X? And do you have any tips for other CXOs how to address that. And then you can use that content, and that's great content marketing. It's not an endorsement like a testimonial is. It's an implicit endorsement. It doesn't mention your product. It's just valuable and good insights. So making your customers like actually a part of that. I think that, again, customer-led marketing, that's a perfect example, thinking beyond just the traditional endorsement testimonial.
Brilliant. Sam, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say is your top takeaway?
Yeah, I'd say, I think if I were listening to this episode, I would say my top takeaway is that there is an opportunity for the best revenue leaders to think about customer video content and customer-led marketing as more as a strategy and much more broadly than just checking the box of social proof. We all know that social proof is important, and it is, but the opportunity even beyond social proof is actually leveraging customers to communicate on your behalf in very creative and effective ways, way beyond the standard check the box approach. And yeah, there's just so many opportunities to get creative with it. We've talked about so many of them. But yeah, there's one takeaway I'd want someone to have. It's that, first of all, start small. If you don't have any video testimonials, start with that. That's the first step. If all of your testimonials are written, you don't have any video testimonials yet, or any customer video content at all, start with just video testimonials. But then eventually you can make cuts of those testimonials that are objection crushers. You can make content marketing versions. So yeah, it's a spectrum and progression, and there's a lot of opportunity to get more advanced. And the more you can involve customers, the voice of the customer in your marketing, the more credibility your messaging will have, and the more ultimately the easier it will be to make an impact and achieve your goals.
Terrific. Sam, if listeners were curious and wanted to connect with you or to find out more, where would you recommend they head to?
Absolutely. My email is a great way to get in touch with me. It's my email is just sam@testimonialhero.com. And then, I think our website, testimonialhero.com, is the best way to find out more about us, view examples. We have some free guides around the 15 best interview questions to ask in a B2B video testimonial. So that would definitely recommend people to, that's a great place to learn more about us.
Sam, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, Vinay, it's been my pleasure. And I hope we have a chance to do it again sometime.